It was the dawn of the third age of podcasting, 30 years after the series had launched.
The Babylon Podcast was a dream given form. Its goal, to discuss the place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully.
It's a port of call, home away from home for established fans, newbies, John, Blaine, and guests.
Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night.
It could be a dangerous place.
Wait, what?
But it's our last, best hope for peace.
This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations.
The year is 2024.
The name of the podcast is
Babylon 5, 30 years later. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Babylon 5, 30 years later. The podcast where John and I look back at an episode of Babylon 5, 30 years after the original broadcast. So, how are you doing, John? You got my messages?
Yeah. There's some concerning stuff in there. And I do feel like I should give you a heads up that some of your unusual behavior you've been doing lately, I might have to mention that to somebody. And just for the concern of Earth, for the better of Earth, you know?
Well, I know peanut butter and banana sandwiches are not that common outside Canada, but eating them is not that unusual.
Yeah, but you were doing peanut butter and pickles on some days, and that's just weird. Actually, I love myself a good peanut butter and pickle sandwich, but that's a whole other conversation. It's Messages from Earth.
Yes, Messages from Earth.
A very run-of-the-mill title for a very provocative episode.
Yes, an episode that originally aired February 19th, 1996 or thereabouts. It is episode 8 of season 3 in both production and broadcast order. It was directed by Mike Vihar and written by J. Michael Straczynski, who's written one or two of these before.
Mm-hmm. A couple.
Yeah. And we've mentioned Mike Vihar before. He is the guy that JMS has said is his favorite director. He works with him as much as possible because he's got almost a telepathic link in terms of his ability of looking at what's on the page and making exactly the images in Straczynski's head show up on screen.
Mm-hmm. And it's cool when you have somebody who has like a similar creative engine in ways that are complementary, not redundant.
Yes. Yeah, I know what that's like. In my previous employment, I worked with a well-known tutoring company, and there was two of us managing one of our locations. And at one point, one of the best partnerships I ever had, because we had virtually identical philosophies about the way that location should be run. And the Venn diagram of our skill sets had almost zero overlap. So, almost perfect agreement about what to do, and no argument over who does which piece.
Yes. Yeah, it's you want somebody who you can work with and relate to and I don't know, creatively flirt with, like not romantically flirt, but like let your brains, tingle with each other a little bit and make stuff happen. And if you have no overlap, then that's hard to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, no overlap in skill set, but beautiful overlap in the philosophy. So it was great, you're good at this piece, I hate doing it, and vice versa.
Okay, you cut out for 1 second, so I was trying to interpret what you might have said. Okay, good. So it worked out then. Oh,
yes, it was probably one of the most productive partnerships I've ever had in terms of paid work.
Very, very good. Well, yeah, I want to get into this because there's a lot, and
there is.
We should preface this. You mentioned this. Do you mind if I do this one?
Go for it.
So, in our playlists out there, or just in your choice of podcast episode listening, you may be only listening to our coverage of the actual episodes because there's supplementary material and maybe you didn't read it. Maybe you're not interested. That's fine. No judgment. However, there is a comic book arc that figures very heavily into the events of this episode. So we strongly recommend that if you haven't read the issues, at least go listen to our discussion. It's our second comic book episode. I'm looking for when we released it. Comic issues 5 through 8. That would have been after the season 2 episode 18, Confessions and Lamentations. There should be a feedback episode after that, and then comic issues 5 through 8. So you should probably listen to that episode if you have not. If you haven't read the comics, at least listen to the discussion, because That was a prelude.
Yep, and since we released those in broadcast breaks, it looks like that would have been our only episode in July 2025.
Yes.
You say knowing we've already recorded it, but this is being recorded on March 27th, 2024. So
we will have going to have released it by then.
Yes.
Yeah,
tenses get weird with time travel and podcasting with lead time.
Douglas Adams says the biggest problem with time travel is not overcoming energy, it's freaking out the grammar.
All right. So, longtime listeners will know that we often do our summaries a plot thread by plot thread basis. Having seen this series before, I decided for at least the 2 episodes I'm summarizing here, that won't cut it. So on one of my rewatches, I just made a scene-by-scene summary. So that's how we're going to go through our plot summary here. And we'll definitely do the same when I'm summarizing for episode 10. I would not be surprised if John chooses to do the same for episode 9.
Yeah, generally when I'm recapping, going through it in an order of narrative is easiest to do, because then you have to actually rearrange things and figure it out, and that takes brain power.
All right, so this episode starts over breakfast. And if you pay close attention here, there's a Night Watch poster in the background during this scene. There's a few of them that have been cropping up in the last few episodes. That's relevant. Anyway, so this starts over breakfast. Garibaldi is complaining, trying to figure out where in his contract he says he has to have the same breakfast every single day for 3 years, and it's some sort of bluish goop. And then Ivanova gets a special delivery. Turns out she got Marcus an identicard that gives him access to some of the station facilities. And when he asked how he could thank her, she said, "Surprise me." So he did, by getting actual bacon and eggs.
I can just imagine her saying that too, just kind of exasperated with him for even wanting to do something in return, because she probably doesn't want to be dealing with him in the first place. It's like, I don't know, surprise me, and walks away.
Yeah, well, anyway, the guy who thinks she bought him roses last week sent her actual bacon and eggs this week. And Sheridan smells it first. Garibaldi's going, "No, it couldn't be. I can get olive oil, I can get this, but there's no way. I haven't seen an actual chicken egg in 3 years." But no, that's what it is. So while they are a bit jealous, they refuse to take a bite when she offers, although they do want to sit and watch as she eats them.
Sometimes you just want to taste it with your eyes.
Yes. Meanwhile, Ivanova promises to kill Marcus next time she sees him, when he wonders what he's doing. Probably not much. Well, no, it turns out he's delivering that package that was mentioned last week. That package is a blonde woman, who we later learn is Dr. Mary Kirkish. And several people are trying to kill her. He does eventually get her to MedLab alive, but she is injured. Now, Garibaldi visits G'Kar in response to a petition. G'Kar, who is still in his prison cell, and will be for several more weeks, has been singing, and his audience heard the noises and assumes he's being tortured, since he's in solitary and they can't see what's going on. Meanwhile, he's been writing his own thoughts in a book, much like Jaquan did. Garibaldi is still struggling to read the book of Jaquan in the original Narn, but he is working on it, and it seems somewhat offensive to even suggest they translate it.
Well, I think that was done a little bit half in tongue-in-cheek, but also it very much represents the attitude towards the Latin scriptures. Don't translate them into the common tongue, even though they weren't originally in Latin. But that's a whole other argument.
Yeah, also, I believe the Quran is another one. So this is not an uncommon attitude.
And you haven't ever experienced Shakespeare to have read him in the original Klingon, so.
Yeah. So the scene ends when Garibaldi gets called away to deal with a Code 7R. And viewers know that that's the meaning of what they're calling the Conspiracy of Light. That meeting begins with the blonde package, revealing that she is an archaeologist who's got quite the story to tell. 7 years ago, she was helping to excavate a shadow vessel on Mars until they were ordered away from the site, at which point another shadow vessel came to cut it free and collect it. She was recently ordered to unearth another one upon Ganymede, but it seems this time the humans want to keep it themselves to learn from it and adapt the technology. And Garibaldi backs it up. He was a shuttle pilot who saw some of the first encounter, but decided not to tell anyone without further proof after being accused of insanity. That story of Garibaldi doing it, that was Garibaldi and Sinclair together. That is the story that is told in flashback in comic issues 5 through 8. So that's where that piece plugs in.
And we're going to come back to it. We'll talk more about that.
Oh, we will. Meanwhile, Zack is covering security when a Night Watch supervisor shows up and just confirms that he wants Zack at tomorrow's meeting and talks about how sometimes you feel like God watching everyone on the monitors unseen.
Yeah, if you're gross.
Yeah. So Sheridan and Delenn meet in private following the meeting. Lennier is going to get Dr. Kirkish safely into Minbari space. And Delenn asks Sheridan if he's really sure he wants to go through with this, and he is. The whole time he's been thinking about it, he's been mostly in uniform but holding his Earth Force badge in hand while he's thinking about it. Then he briefs the rest of the group. This time he's out of uniform, wearing civilian clothing. The plan: Sheridan and the White Star will go into Earth space to destroy the Shadow vessel, with Delenn coming along. It is a very high-risk mission. There are many objections, especially with the possibility of fighting Earth ships. And Sheridan's response says, the decision is mine and mine alone, and it's made. And then he goes through detailing how, if things go sour, well, he's leaving everything that points to Earth Force behind, and here's how they will fake his death, if it fails, for plausible deniability.
Mm-hmm.
Cut to the Night Watch meeting, where our supervisor is talking about how corruption and disloyalty is rampant, and they're finding it in the highest levels of government. Arrests are coming, lists are being made, and it's time to start taking anonymous sources, time to monitor anyone who seems to be suspicious in any way. And Zack is getting extremely uncomfortable with the latitude that Night Watch measures are being given to investigate anyone who isn't Night Watch. Members of Night Watch are automatically excluded from this scrutiny.
We'll only look at command officers if they do anything unusual.
So, on the White Star, Sheridan is falling asleep in the command chair until Lennier uses impeccable logic to send him to bed. He takes the bunk next to Delenn's. The Minbari sleep on elevated beds, which don't look particularly soft, because they feel that sleeping horizontally is inviting death.
It's also very slidey, like he couldn't stay up on it. It's like at 30 degrees or more. It was a very steep bed.
It was. Apparently it was inspired by the beds that Straczynski saw in Stratford upon Avon, because during the days of the plague, they thought that sleeping horizontally was inviting death, so they slept propped up as well.
Oh, fun.
And now, to deal with his acid reflux, Straczynski now sleeps in a modified bed that also keeps his head above his feet. So he's effectively sleeping in a Minbari bed, although he was not at the time he wrote this.
I actually do like to sleep with a slight elevation also to my head. But slight. A few degrees. Maybe 10. Not 30.
Yeah, I also find it's effective for dealing with acid reflux when my allergies are bad, and that's a thing. But anyway, back to the synopsis. So Sheridan is struggling to sleep. He ends up talking with Delenn instead. And part of the conversation ends up revealing that he sleeps best with the sound of rain, so Delenn has the White Star play that sound for him. It's actually a really nice story about his father that doesn't seem super relevant to the rest. So
very great character moment, though.
Yeah. Back on the station, Marcus is reporting to a distracted Ivanova. They end up arguing about a number of things, including Ivanova's confusion about Marcus's role in everything. Ivanova eventually admits that the argument is happening because she's really just angry at this situation, and she's misdirecting and blaming Marcus because she has no one else on hand to blame. Anyway, the White Star arrives at Ganymede, and it overhears broadcasts about putting a pilot into the Shadow ship. These living pilots will merge with the ships, and if the pilot is not properly prepared, the merger goes badly. This pilot was not properly prepared. The ship is insane, and it's just blindly destroying everything. So Sheridan takes the White Star into a direct conflict, knowing that they have little chance of winning, but a lot more than anyone else. Sheridan lures the ship inside Jupiter. They push past the safety limits, but they do manage to get out of Jupiter's depths, while the Shadow vessel does not. So Sheridan has now destroyed 2 Shadow vessels with a ship that cannot do it solo, but he's had to do it in both cases by using something in the environment. Last time it was the jump gate that was abandoned. And this time it was the planet Jupiter. So before leaving the planet entirely, the Earth Alliance destroyer Agamemnon arrives to take them into custody. Sheridan refuses to surrender or to fire on his old vessel. Delenn comes up with the exit strategy. Open a jump point within the atmosphere. It's the first atmospheric jump on record, but they do survive and escape. When they return to Babylon 5, they find ISN reporting that the alien ship the audience knows as the White Star attacked the research outpost and is being credited as being destroyed by the Agamemnon. So they are deflecting. They're lying about who caused the attack. the presence of the Shadow Vessel, and the ultimate fate of the White Star. Now, Zach shows up for another Night Watch meeting. He and the supervisor are the only two in the room. Turns out the guy called him half an hour early just to talk to him one-on-one. They know that Captain Sheridan was missing for a few days because the Night Watch supervisor was able to check the logs on his quarters. He did not go home. So apparently the guy doesn't know his relationship with Delenn either. There might have been another explanation.
I've wondered if they've gotten to that point, yeah, but conceivably.
Yeah. So no, they are not at that point yet, but in any event, he is putting pressure on Zach to use his relationship with Garibaldi to get the information, because security people have been covering for him. That means he's got Garibaldi in his pocket. And Zach speaks out. He still considers Garibaldi a friend, but he says, Garibaldi hasn't trusted me since I signed up with you guys. If he did, he'd brought me in on this weeks ago, which just gives a supervisor ammunition to say, oh, so you admit that something is going on. Zach's going, well, I didn't say that. So he's feeling a lot of pressure on both ends, and his supervisor says, you're going to have to make a choice at some point. From there, we go to Ivanova's quarters, where Marcus shows up with an organizational diagram showing exactly how he fits in it all, and this does get Ivanova laughing. He says that was the goal.
It is very much middle school poster board project level kind of thing.
Yes. So it's a nice little moment which is interrupted when Sheridan calls Ivanova through the link telling her to turn on ISN right now, when they learn that President Clark has declared martial law on Earth. Roll closing credits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although she doesn't say martial law, she says martial law, which just seems to not have the weight. Oh yes, Earth is now under martial law.
Yes.
But that's okay. Minor quibble. And an otherwise fantastically engaging and intriguing episode. Gosh, where do you want to start?
Yeah, there's a lot to cover here. We have talked before about how Season 3 is well represented in the top 10 episodes of the entire series list on the IMDb. There are 5 episodes in the top 10 that come from Season 3.
Have we seen any of them yet, or is this the first one? That's
the thing. This isn't on the list.
Oh. Okay.
This is not top 10. That's where I was going. For as good and as engaging as this is not top 10.
Wow. And where are we?
This is an 8.6 out of 10 on the IMDb users, and the top 10 starts at a 9.1. All 5 of the top 10 episodes from Season 3 are still ahead of us.
Okay.
Yeah, there is so much to talk about and so much coming. And yeah.
So there is a phenomenon that I have felt. I have no idea how shared an experience this is. But when you're getting into a world or a story or a narrative or something, and you experience it at a particular level, you begin to get sort of a, mental subjective response to this world. And you forget, or it's easy to forget, that there's a whole lot more that you have not yet discovered, that everyone else who knows this has already learned and discovered. It's past tense, it's history for them. And occasionally there'll be things that happen that shift and change the sort of subjective shape of that story in your head. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is new and different now. But no, it's still old history to everybody else who's seen it. And this is one of those episodes where Babylon 5 has kind of taken on a particular shape over the course of seasons 1 and 2 and the most of season 3. But the shape changed today. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, we're starting to see a change in direction, and the show is becoming something different. So it's almost like, as we're really studying it, it's like you're a mechanic. You've got this vehicle up on 4 jacks. And then today someone just came in and started really, really cranking one of those jacks.
Mm-hmm.
Starting next week, people are going to start kicking them away.
Okay. Kicking the jacks off under the car?
Yeah. We're going to have, there's a lot coming. So yes, episode 8 here did not crack the top 10. 9 and 10 both do.
Okay. So next episode, we're getting into some of the top 10 episodes of the entire series. Interesting. Yeah. Breakfast. So I'd like to think that after we cut the scene, she went ahead and shared her breakfast with the other guys. because that's kind of just this nice thing to do, and she's a nice person. I don't think she would actually eat with them staring at her the entire time.
No, I can't see her getting more than halfway through the meal before just going, I can't do it, and just walking away, leaving food and fork behind and just giving them no choice. But, because when she does that, they're going to look at each other going, well, we can't let it go to waste. And then, and then dig it.
There's no way we're going to throw this away. But speaking of the eggs, okay, Garibaldi makes a really interesting point. We're so far away that it would take forever to get eggs out here. They would spoil. Okay, that's fine. Except later in the same episode, Earth is 2 days away. They can get there in 2 days by jump gate. So,
with a Minbari high-speed vehicle, not necessarily with a cargo cruiser.
Okay. But I still feel like that means that you can transport goods like that speedily if you have the resources.
Yeah, and that's the impression I got, was it's just he couldn't afford to get them there on time because of the kind, right? You'd have to pay a non-cargo ship to get them there.
And maybe that's what he meant by it can't be done, because he started to say some of the costs. He cut himself off and said it can't be done. Maybe it's like, there's no way I can afford that. I'm not going to pay $1,000 for an egg.
Yeah, or credits or whatever. It could be like, yeah, I'm not going to give a year's salary to have to have bacon and eggs, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind that the official chronology on this episode says the events start March 18th and end on April 8th of 2260. So there is some time lapse which isn't obvious here. I'd have to go through the chronology and see why it's spread out that much. That's the official fandom dates.
Mm-hmm.
I have the chronology book that actually spells out as much as possible with actual
But that'd have to be
dates
time skipping before and after the mission, because we're given very definite time frame for the mission itself.
Yeah.
Captain was gone for 4 days. But dealing with and responding to, although, as soon as Dr. Kirkish, and she doesn't really look very Kirkish, as soon as Dr. Kirkish tells her story, it seems like the pressure's on. We've got to go. We've got to get this taken care of. But whenever they get there, they're basically too late. So maybe there were some hangups in getting the Minbari off the ground, or getting the White Star off the ground, or whatever.
Or even calling the Minbari in, or they're calling the White Star in to have it ready.
Right. Because who knows where it is, and they had to bring in people to man it every time. And
yeah. But yeah, she doesn't look very Kirkish. To me, she looks more like a Michelle Thomas than a Kirk to me. But that could just be because I saw that actress as Michelle Thomas in 108 episodes of Matlock.
She's Matlock's daughter, right?
His daughter was the assistant in season 1, and she takes over as the assistant in season 2.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, she's not the daughter, but she fills that same role
in the storytelling
from seasons 2 through 6. And I want to say it lasted 7 seasons. I try to remember if that one is 7 or 9. I have them all.
7 of 9.
Yes.
Okay, so speaking of Kirkish, we need to talk about the conversation and the flashbacks and the comics.
Yes.
It's funny with the scripting, because there are two perspectives you have to take into account with a scene like this, with Garibaldi giving his side. There is what is going to make the storytelling efficient for the viewer, and what is going to be realistic for the person to say to his friends. And we lean on the side of efficient for the viewer, because he just says he and another guy were trying to get back to civilization. I feel like if this were on a real space station, Garibaldi would look around and say, that's how I first met Commander Sinclair. He would tell them that. But there's no reason to bring that element into the storytelling, because it's not relevant to the events at hand. And it actually maybe muddy the waters a little bit. And B, well, if you read it in the comics, then and you don't need to hear it again.
Yeah. This was actually addressed online by JMS. Someone asked, his response came out on February 23rd, 1996. The question was, why didn't Garibaldi say more about Sinclair, and shouldn't Kosh have been at the meeting? And he responded, number 1, there was an outsider Kirkish in the room. Yes, she's helped him, but he's still going to hold back some info because he doesn't know what impact it might have on Sinclair. He's protective of him.
Okay.
And then the second one, yes, Kosh should have been there. Kosh wasn't. Kosh hasn't been carrying his weight, if you ask me. I hope this doesn't cause a problem somewhere. And trails off with an ellipsis.
Oh, Straczynski says that Kosh hasn't been pulling his own weight lately?
Yep.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So Kosh's absence at that meeting was meant to be noticed.
Yes.
But To recap some of the salient points from that flashback. So Garibaldi was washed up, drunken transport driver, and Sinclair was on a mission to investigate something on Mars. We never really got what Sinclair's perspective was on that. They end up seeing a lot of things, but among them, they do see one of the shadow vessels on Mars. They also see a lot of experiments being done on humans. We see, but of course none of the characters recognize her because they don't know her yet. We see Talia Winters as one of those being experimented upon, which helps to feed into her whole backstory and storyline of being, more than meets the eye. And in that facility, Garibaldi finds a Psi Corps badge. And in the comic, it ends with him saying he's determined to find out who owns that Psi Corps badge, which he holds up here. It's interesting to note that the framework of the story is him flashing back to those events while on a mission to Mars with Keffer, where they again see another shadow vessel. And that doesn't come up at all here. So Garibaldi has seen shadow vessels on Mars on 2 different occasions. Well, I don't know if the second one was on Mars, if the Keffer mission was to Mars or to somewhere else that just reminded him of Mars.
That one wasn't Mars. It was, legally, it was Centauri territory.
That's right. Because it was allegedly someplace that Mollari was going to be going and that he didn't.
Yeah.
Right. So not Mars. But Garibaldi has actually seen these vessels a couple times. And he and Sheridan have a conversation about it at the end of the issue, that it's the same kind of ship that Keffer has seen out there in hyperspace. It's out there, and we don't know what it is. So on some level, Sheridan has also been aware that this is a thing. And so all the pieces are coming together for the first time in ways that they don't really go into too much depth here, but you can headcanon that the wheels are turning in Sheridan's and Garibaldi's minds.
Yes. Yeah, that one's not a huge reach.
What else from the comics connections did you want to bring up? I just want to recap the events for anyone who had forgotten.
Yeah, I think those were the main ones that, yes, they've seen that before, and we know there's some sort of experiment. And this time, Dr. Kirkus is saying it's different. They want to make us more like them. They're trying to steal and adapt the technology instead of giving it back. But this also feeds into what we saw, I think it was the tail end of season 2 when Mr. Morden
was on Earth.
Yeah, he was on Earth meeting with the higher-ups, and the Psi Corps guy says, well, you know what, rather than brushing this away, it was early season 1, because they're responding after Keffer had died. He's like, well, rather than brush it under the rug, we could use this to further our agenda. At which point Morton is going, oh, tell me more. And that's when we cut away.
Mm-hmm. So it does make you wonder if the Babylon 5 people are misinterpreting things slightly, because the way they're talking is that Earth is trying to sneak steal a shadow vessel without the shadows knowing about it. But what if they're trying to retrieve it as a joint effort and then use it? No, because Morden strikes me as the kind of person who wants to keep his cards close to his vest. And even if he's allying himself with Earth, he's not going to be like giving them an ace or anything like that. So yeah, maybe Earth is actually trying to sneak steal this to get one up on their more powerful allies.
Yeah, there's a lot that we can speculate on. And some of the answers are coming. All we've seen is that, yes, in this case, they did take that incident and use it to forward their agenda because martial law has been declared.
Right. Delenn and Sheridan, they both understand the stakes here. They're ready to fake his death if this goes south because he will have actually died. They don't actually say it explicitly, but you get the strong impression they're ready to blow up the White Star if they can't get away. They're ready to go down.
Yeah, what he explicitly says is we will not be captured no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And Franklin's job, should things go south, is to provide the biomatter that they're going to use when they blow up his personal shuttle, which now, reading it all in the full continuity, it feels almost like they could have taken inspiration from the way G'Kar faked his death in Blood Oath.
Oh, yeah.
The third novel.
Yep. Get a little copying from him. So that leads us to G'Kar. It's a nice little segue there. It's one little scene to check in with him. I'm getting some very messianic vibes from G'Kar. And I realize that you cannot comment one way or the other, except to talk about the scene as it is right here. But with him off on his own, reflecting on existence, recently having come into contact with higher powers, writing all of his thoughts about the Narn people and everything down. It looks like he is making a new scripture. The best parallel I can come up with in actual history is Joseph Smith writing another testament centuries after the previous ones. Now, we're not going to comment on, that religion and but everything else. It just seems like that's a parallel, because you have somebody many moons after the religion is the faith and the culture around it have been established, coming along and saying, "Oh, but wait, there's more."
Yeah, the three historical similarities that JMS cites in his commentary in the episode are Lech Walesa in Poland, Nelson Mandela in Africa, and Adolf Hitler. So sometimes people learn the wrong lessons from behind bars, but they will often write down what they're learning.
Okay, well, those were not religious people. Those were political figures. So I guess maybe I'm going the wrong way with it. Okay. But yeah, being incarcerated and writing your thoughts down and then becoming a leader among your people afterwards. I can definitely see that being the case here. They go on the ship. Trying to think of what else really struck my brain as we were going through this. I really liked the strategies they faced with the shadows. But before we talk about that, though, we talk about the whole joining a living being to the heart of the ship is how it's fully operational. That's new information, and that's weird.
Is it that weird after we've seen Infection? That's how that alien carapace armor weapon worked in episode 4.
So this episode brings in international expeditions, which was also set up in the Infection episode.
Yes, interplanetary expeditions, yes.
What did I say?
International.
Both things. I mean, they're also international. There's just really a lot of nationals.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the bonding of person to technology, yeah, that's been established. But so the ships are basically living beings. Mm-hmm. In Transformers lore, we have the idea of the Transtector. We have this mechanical large device that a person once bonded with. It's now basically that device becomes part of them. They become part of that device. And so you have this bonding thing going on, which in Transformers they can also separate themselves from. But while they're connected, it's all one thing. So yeah, these ships are living beings with a person at their heart. Mm-hmm. Which I don't know, just makes it feel more sinister.
Yeah, when they're talking about whether or not the person is properly prepared, it's how do we know how to prepare them? How do we know if that's the case? Right? Are these people volunteers or not volunteers? So there is that question about, yes, now we know how this is driving. It raises a lot more questions about the technology and how it's designed and what it works with. And
probably didn't prepare them properly because they're not doing it under the supervisory auspices of other Shadow members. They're doing it on their own. They're sneak thieving.
Yeah.
But it does bring up the another reference to the comics I was going to make earlier. So we see the ship take off. It starts lasering everything around it, which made me think of whenever she saw the ship when it's lasering the ground. And she's like, at first I thought it was destroying the other ship, but then I realized it was digging it out. And it was down there for 25 minutes, and then we heard a huge scream. So I feel like that scream is the final moment of bonding between the living creature, the living person, and the ship itself. Because we hear it there and we hear it here on Ganymede. So whatever process the Shadows had to do to get that ship going again after 1,000 years, it involved a horrible scream. And in the comics, they make a big deal of pointing out that whenever they returned to the crash site of the ship, it was absolutely barren, like nothing had ever been there. And so connecting that with this, we get the idea that that ship was salvaged and rescued by the Shadows, not destroyed.
Yeah, they were building their forces, trying to do so slowly and quietly. So yes, that second ship that disappeared for 20 to 25 minutes, it brought a new pilot. That's some stuff JMS confirmed on Usenet.
We got another reference to the 1,000 years ago thing, because the ship had been buried on Mars for 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm. And now there's one buried on Ganymede.
What else? The stuff with the White Star was interesting. I liked his strategies. I liked him taking the ship into Jupiter's atmospheric pressure. hoping that the pressure would destroy the other ship before the gravity made it inescapable. Which, I don't know. I realize it's science fiction, so the limits on what you can do are purely created by the writer. So if ships are flying away from stars, I feel like flying away from Jupiter shouldn't be that hard. But Babylon 5 also tends to play power levels a bit more conservatively.
And flying away from stars, you don't have to deal with the viscosity of the atmosphere that you're in at the time.
Right. Forces working against you while you're trying to fly up.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're using like Bussard ram scoops or something to collect it, well, when you're actually in a planet that's made of gas and you go deep enough that it's not just hydrogen anymore, it is science fiction. And again, like you're saying, the writers can put in some limits, but as someone who's actually legitimately studied the interiors of stars and the interior structure of Jupiter, it felt like a reasonable limit to me.
Okay.
Yes, I wasn't always a teacher. My first 2 degrees are in physics, but yeah.
Right. Having the Agamemnon show up was cool. I thought it was an interesting choice. They didn't come out and say right when it showed up, "Oh, my old ship." They just kind of expected you to make that connection. I mean, a little bit later in the scene, he says, "I'm not going to fire on my old ship." But unless you just remember your facts, you don't really understand what the big deal is at first. But
aside from in the briefing, they made a little bit of a big deal about the possibility of firing on other human vessels. So any Earth vessel would have been a concern.
Right, other humans, but not Sheridan's own ship.
Yeah. Yeah, so you get that. There was always that hesitation there. And if you forgot that it used to be Sheridan's, they do remind you, and it just adds another layer. So you don't need to remember it's not his ship to understand why he's hesitant to fire on it, because it's just other Earth Force personnel.
They are
just likely, yeah, they just don't necessarily have access to the same information that the B5 crew have had.
And if they were to fire and get captured, that's huge crimes. You know, doing a covert mission and being sneaky, that's one level of crime. Firing back on Earth Force vessels, your own vessels, that would be a different crime.
Yeah. You might survive the punishment for one of those.
Right. I'm trying to remember what there was. Oh yeah, they did the whole opening up the gate in the atmosphere, which they said had never been done. But it wasn't just that it was in a planetary atmosphere, it was also in a very hydrogen-rich atmosphere, which is very explosive. And the concern was that the level of energies being emitted by a jump gate would have explosive ramifications on the atmosphere. Turns out that was minimal or none, but it was a legitimate concern. We've had in Star Trek that you can't go into warp when you're in an atmosphere. And in some of the tie-in fiction, before some of the rules have been explored more thoroughly, you couldn't go into warp in a planetary system because it was too close to the planets. So here, opening a jump gate in the actual upper atmosphere of Jupiter, that is definitely one of those things that fans of the genre would realize, yes, this should not be done. And the fact that they were able to do it as a first-time thing, yeah, that's a familiar idea.
Also, just going back to the scene with G'Kar, I do want to really praise the lighting that they had there. Sorry, I know we've gone a little past that, but it is beautifully lit so that G'Kar's sleeping chamber is completely black. So when he's teasing Garibaldi saying, yeah, I'm not going to let you read this until it's done, and he recedes into the blackness, he is gone. It's not dark. He is just not visible whatsoever. So they had to have done it without a key light. The key light is the light that usually sits next to the camera. So film noir is known for having a low key light because that key light will wash away shadows. Right. Sitcoms usually have a very high key light. You're unlikely to see a shadow when you're watching your favorite sitcom.
Right.
Because they have that light right next to the camera, nice and bright, so that all the shadows would be behind the objects as they appear on camera, so the shadows are swamped. The low key light gives you that moody atmospheric feel where some of the shadows are visible. They could have had a zero key light, because if it was there, it would have illuminated that bed, and they didn't. So it's, again, a really nice touch that's coming back with Mike Vihar, and he plays with lighting a lot. JMS comments about how he likes to have fluorescent lights between the camera and the person, even though there's no place for that source of light to appear on set. And he kept assuring JMS, no one will notice, it'll just look cool. 5 years on the air, Vihar did that every episode, and nobody ever called him out on it. So JMS says, yeah, okay, he learned the rule of television. When in doubt, do what looks cool. And people are not going to gripe.
The rule of cool.
Yeah, and it worked. He also helped redesign the White Star Bridge. So some of the consoles have been moved a little bit, and he actually said these ones slide together when they go to combat mode so that you know they're combat ready. So if you actually notice, at one point they moved 2 consoles together, which is there because Mike Vahar says it'll be a cue to the audience that they're going into combat mode that you can use in later episodes, and it will look cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it does. So just bring it all together. Yeah, I see why Vahar was such a welcome director on this series, because, man, he did stuff like that well. I say did. I should probably say does. I think he's still working.
Right. The stuff with Nightwatch is probably, of all the events in here, the ones that are going to have the most immediate and large ramifications. I like the conflict we're seeing in Zach Allen. I kind of, on the one hand, my brain's like, why doesn't he just get out and stop dealing with these guys? But on the other hand, I know the answer to that, because as soon as you ditch Nightwatch, you are now under suspicion of Nightwatch. So he probably feels trapped. Although they haven't actually talked about that on screen yet, it's not hard to imagine that he feels trapped there. And yet you can kind of see it in his face and what he says whenever they're talking about Garibaldi in the ladder scene. This is still his friend. Now, things aren't great between them, and he has some recriminations against Garibaldi for that, but it's still his friend. He doesn't want to rat him out to the Gestapo, which is basically what we have here. We have a secret police, and they're suspecting the captain. The phrase that he has the chief in his pocket was an interesting one, because in a healthy command structure environment, everyone should be in the commander's pocket, as it were, because the commander is someone that they respect and they're going to do what he says, you know? So like that phrasing there implies the chief of security of the station should not be answering to the captain when he should be. So yeah, it was.
Yeah, it tells us that character, who's played by Vaughn Armstrong, has already decided that the captain is guilty. And it may be worth noting Vaughn Armstrong may seem familiar because he actually holds the record for playing the greatest number of characters in Star Trek. He's above Jeffrey Combs in that. So he said 27 Star Trek appearances, playing 8 different characters, or 11 different characters from 8 different races.
Oh, wow. Now I've got to look at that list, but not right now.
Yeah, I think he's probably most recognizable as the admiral that Enterprise reports to, that Admiral Maxwell Forrest.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, named in honor of DeForest Kelley. Yeah, so that's probably his most recognizable because it's recurring and without makeup.
Right, because if you're an alien species on Star Trek, what point is your face?
Yeah, but he's been 2 different Cardassians, Goldenar and Seskal. He's been a Vidian, a Hirogen. He was the Romulan Tilek Ramor, 3 different Klingons, including Korus and Korath. He was the former Borg drone 2 of 9 or Lancer on Voyager. He was a Cretacean, and then Admiral Forrest is his only human character. So he's the only actor who's actually played 5 different characters on one series. He was 5 different characters on Voyager.
Wow. Which, with makeup, you can do that easily.
Yeah. Especially since Voyager didn't have a lot of recurring aliens, or at least none that would occur beyond 1 or 2 seasons, because the whole point is, well, now that's behind us, and we're focused on what's ahead of us, because we're moving from A to B.
Right. They are traveling. They are on a voyage, as it were. Almost like a trek through the stars kind of thing.
Yes.
But, yeah, with the planet under martial law now we had stuff at the beginning about Clark being under investigation and how the people answering for him to the Senate Investigative Committee are trying to blow things off. But at the end of the episode, they're using these events to put the planet under martial law, which I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen next. It seems to me that'd be a really good way of hushing up those investigations, because we got more stuff to deal with right now, and it's under martial law, so shut up or go to prison.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny because while we're talking about this episode, we're also reading the novel Clark's Law, which is coming up soon in our discussions. And that really does a good job of harping on some of the background cultural elements of what it's like to live under President Clark.
It does, yeah.
We'll talk more about that in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yes, that is coming. That'll be one of our fill-in episodes, because there is a broadcast break between episodes 9 and 10 of this season.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. So this is the first of what's basically a trilogy of episodes. And after part 2, we're going away for a month and a half. So, that's a thing. And we'll come back for feedback and for a novel coverage during that time. But yeah, it's going to be a minute, well, I guess 5 weeks from February 26th to April 1st to cover those things. But yeah, that is actually probably the first time that this show has effectively used the cliffhanger instead of just immediately going to the next episode week.
Yeah, and John's saying this without even having seen the cliffhanger yet. But
yeah, I don't even know what it is. Blaine has said, are you sure you don't want to just rearrange our recording schedule so we can do episode 10 right after episode 9? Because you're going to want to. I will watch episode 10 right after we talk about episode 9. So I'll be okay. But then we'll talk about it when we get to it. And hopefully, if all goes well, both of those episodes are going to have a guest. So that'll be fun.
Yes. Yeah, that is the plan.
All right. Other things?
I think the only other comment I want to make, apparently there's a lot of people questioning the casting of Jason Carter as Marcus as an action hero until they filmed the pre-credits sequence for this.
Yeah, he's pretty good with the bow staff.
Yeah, beyond the bow staff, that whole sequence, they used a stunt double for one shot, and it's not the shot where he hits 2 guys, runs up a wall, and does a flip, and then hits more guys. That was Jason Carter.
That was cool.
Yeah, that was no stunt double. So once they filmed that, people stopped questioning whether or not he was going to be an action hero.
Well, he's a bit pretty, and maybe they shouldn't think he could do that.
And apparently without wardrobe, he looks kind of emaciated, or at least he did at the time. So he's not physically imposing, but he is capable.
His scene with Ivanova at the end was cute. They've been playing their relationship a little cat and mousey. We realized that from Ivanova's perspective, she was in a relationship relatively recently, and it went all kinds of bad in all the worst ways. Well, not all the worst ways, but a lot of the worst ways. And so she's probably not really interested in getting involved with anyone. And you have this guy who just kind of comes along out of nowhere and not only represents a lot of shaking up of things, like she says in this episode, but also has taken a liking to her, and she's maybe not ready for that. But he's being just so damn charming about the whole thing, and not pushy. You know, he's just there and interacting with her and being obvious that he's liking her, but not demanding anything from her in return. You know, he's just trying to be a good influence in her life in the hopes that they will get together. But like I said, he doesn't seem to be too pushy about that, which is kind of neat. And their last scene right before the martial law sequence was very, very cute.
Yeah, well, when you have that, right, when you have people laughing over the bacon and eggs at the start, when JMS is writing a script and he's got you laughing before the credits, that's a sign that this might be your last chance to laugh for a long time. And then same thing, I think, when he had you laughing again right before Earth declares martial law. There you go. There's your pressure valve. Let's get the pressure up before we crank it right up to the top. So are we ready for the last best hope?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so what was your standout character or character moment in this one?
JMS is the writer? No. I think I have to give it to Sheridan as the standout character of the episode. Just with, I don't know, obviously the episode kind of centers around him more than the rest of the cast, but it's just, he puts it all on the line. He's ready to give up his life. He's ready to do everything it takes to go and stop this ship. But at the same time, Ivanova is left in command of a station that she might want command of, but not at the cost of losing her captain, you know? So it's a really conflicted situation for her. I don't know. There's a lot going on here, but if I had to pick one standout character for the episode, it'd probably be Sheridan.
Yeah, I could see that. And I am honestly torn between John Sheridan and David Sheridan. We don't yet know that John Sheridan's father's first name is David, but just that story he tells with Delennon about how Rain helped him sleep and his dad heard him pacing before exams, and he couldn't sleep, so his dad went out there
and made it rain.
And used the garden hose to make it rain because it wasn't raining so that his son can sleep. Like, this is the kind of parent I'm aspiring to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really nice moment, even though it didn't have a lot of bearing aside from giving an in to show that, Sheridan and Delenn are more comfortable talking about their personal lives and personal histories now than they have been. So, I made the joke about how not opening his quarters wasn't definitive, but they are not there yet, but we can see that at some point over the horizon.
Yeah, there's a blooming romance, which as we're going back through our first season episodes, because we're listening and rewatching to our releases, which are at the time of this recording, we're in the break between episodes 8 and 9 of season 1, and seeing how there were hints of a future romance between Delenn and Sinclair. Realizing, of course, that with Sinclair gone, they have to redistribute storylines. But it is easy to see that things are moving forward with them. And you have to have those moments that have no bearing on anything, because that's where your character development comes from. That's where you have not necessarily even development, but just like character, not development as in moving forward, but development as in showing who they are. Just moments of people being themselves in ways that don't contribute to the plot. And those are important. If you have shows, movies, comics, whatever, that are always concerned with moving the plot forward and never just giving the people a chance to be themselves, you don't have a character-driven story. You have a plot-driven story. So it's good to see things like that here.
Yeah, and it lets us see the rest of the person, because there's very few people who are the same at work as they are at home.
Right.
I do not interact with my daughter the same way I interact with my students, and not just because I don't teach 2-year-olds. It is a different dynamic. So when we see some of that conversation was not a conversation between colleagues, it was a conversation between friends.
Exactly.
So yeah, we're seeing the rest of who both Sheridan and Delenn are in that moment. So whether it's David Sheridan or whether it's just that conversation that they had on adjacent slanted beds, which were slanted in ways that they can't just roll over onto each other's bed before people get the wrong idea.
Yeah, they were alternating angles. So the person next to you could face because of your angles.
Yeah. So yes, makes conversation easy, but not much else. Which is good, because it looks like it's a common sleeping area on the White Star. Because there's a lot more than 2 beds in that room. So yes, privacy is not guaranteed.
The Minbari are not above some co-ed hanky-panky. So reducing the opportunity for that in a military environment is probably a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, shall we start giving form to the dream?
So much. I mean, it would be easy to say that everything counts for the future, and it's probably going to count next episode. But there are definitely some things I feel like are highlight developments of this episode that we need to remember in the future. Things like Night Watch now suspects the officers of the station. That this is now 3 different crashed, no, it is 2 different crashed shadow cruisers in the Earth star system. That has to be meaningful, I would think. But what else?
So again, like you said, a lot of it is obvious, right? Mm-hmm. We probably don't have to tell people or listeners that the fact that President Clark just declared martial law is going to matter.
Right.
We know that, yes, things are in motion. Night Watch is part of the arm of that. With we're calling him the Night Watch organizer, he's actually credited as security guard number 1. He doesn't get an on-screen name. But he is saying that, yeah, things are going to start happening. There are going to be arrests. So Night Watch seems to be poised to be a promotion from a passive observing organization to something very different. Right? Because if they're saying we cannot trust anyone except those members of the Night Watch, well, what are members of the Night Watch going to be asked to do next?
Right.
So again, we have the moment where it was actually Delenn who figured out the solution for getting away from Jupiter and from the Agamemnon without opening fire. So yes, she may be a member of the religious caste, but she does seem to be able to think like a member of the warrior caste when necessary.
Which kind of fits with some of the subtext we've gotten from her in the past. There's more to Delenn than meets the eye, and it's been honestly a while since she had much mystery to her. But especially going back to the earlier episodes, I feel like there's more to Delenn than we have actually seen even so far in the show.
Yeah, and we will know more about what G'Kar is writing. Mm-hmm. And when they said he'd be there for at least so many weeks, he's counting down. So he seems to have a definite release date in his mind, at least.
Right. Well, that's probably always the fear whenever you're in incarceration, is that someone's going to miscount or forget to release you. I've never been incarcerated for any kind of long period, so it's a guess on my part. But I imagine that there's some level of your brain that's like, I really don't hope they don't forget that I'm supposed to get out in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think those elements are the ones, and just the fact that the Night Watch posters have been showing up in the background more and more over the past few episodes. If you pay close attention, they've been adding them to the set dressing over time.
Kind of like they had rangers in the backgrounds of the station for all those episodes.
Yes, much like that. So I think those are the subtle ones. Again, the specific events, knowing that this is part 1 of 3, I think there's a lot we don't need to point out because so much of it is going to come back in the next couple of weeks.
Well, to be honest, I would not have noticed this was part 1 of 3 without having been told it ahead of time. Because the way this show tells stories, there is often a sense of dramatic suspense coming out of an episode because things are happening and the show is moving forward. I do wonder, looking back, if it was advertised in the trailers as being part of an arc. I haven't watched a single trailer for a Babylon 5 episode while doing this podcast. Like, the Star Trek ones are all out there. It's really easy to find Star Trek trailers. I have no idea if it's easy to find Babylon 5 trailers or not. Now I'm curious.
Yeah, I haven't gone looking for them either. And I do remember when I first saw this and watched the series on DVD and Blu-ray, one of the things that really impressed me is the way that, even though it is very much an intricate ongoing story, each episode also clearly has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm a fan of Deep Space Nine, as people know. Those last 10 episodes are great. First 6 episodes of season 6 are great, but they rarely stand alone. You don't get that beginning, middle, and end. You get to be continued, to be continued, to be continued, to be continued all the way through. Whereas this one, yes, it is structured as a trilogy, but each could stand alone on a rewatch if you were so inclined. I haven't done as much rewatching of Babylon 5 as I have of Trek, because Babylon 5 is so rewarding in that binging effort. And I was very happy when John suggested that this would be the show that we podcasted about when I first suggested a different series, because I've been wanting to come back to it, but I knew with this one, it's not like, say, Next Gen, where I'd happily go back and watch the highlight episodes, or the same for almost every sitcom. I knew when I came back to Babylon 5, I was going to come back to The Gathering and then stick with it for the next 120 or so hours of broadcast. Because that's just the way the show works. That's where I think this really excels, is when you sit down and see how the whole thing comes together. So even though there's great moments and great individual episodes, it's definitely more than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm. I remember when that Deep Space Nine 10-episode finale was being advertised, because that was the kind of thing that hadn't been done much. I mean, obviously, like you said, Babylon 5 was over here just doing it quietly the whole time. But they really hyped up the fact that it was a 10-episode story. It was a 10-part finale, and that was part of the marketing of that ending story. I think they might have done something similar with season 6, but season 7, as they made their way through those 10 episodes, they did like countdown style stuff in their advertisings for the episodes. It was a big deal at the time. But Babylon 5 was doing their saga based storytelling the whole time as well.
Yep, I remember Cheers had its final 5 countdown in the marketing. I have just finished a rewatch of Cheers. I had it on in the background when I was working on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there is kind of that final 5. It was a big deal. The last episode taking the 2-hour time slot with a retrospective, and then it just was so long they've chopped it into 3 pieces for syndicated broadcast. It started in the 90-minute block. But there was very little continuity in Cheers.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected there to be. I didn't know that they had marketed their finale as a 5-part thing, because I wouldn't have expected there to be a 5-part thing.
Yep, they had it as a final 5 countdown, and aside from the fact that, I don't know if you're familiar with Cheers, so spoilers for a show that ended in 1993, one of the characters, Woody, gets elected to the local government, to the city council, in the first of those final 5, and then the rest, they just comment on it, mostly in the context of, yeah, he's going to be in the show because he doesn't actually take office until that last episode.
Okay.
Because there's that delay between where you win the election and where you get sworn in.
Right.
And that is pretty much the only piece of continuity I could think of that drives the rest together.
And maybe it was just more of a, hey, there are only 5 episodes left. Are you watching? More than a 5 parts.
Yeah, I think it was purely a marketing thing, because watching those last 5, it's like, aside from that piece, there's nothing that says it's those 5. And I think pieces are parts 2, 3, and 4 are almost interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They mentioned that Woody won, and he hasn't taken office yet. So okay, parts 2, 3, and 4 come after part 1 and before part 5. Other than that, that's the way sitcoms work. You might have major events in season finale, season premiere, and sweeps week, but especially sitcoms, the networks would fight long-term continuity because they wanted any episode, or people to be able to pick up any episode, watch it, and walk away and come back 3 weeks later and not feel like they missed stuff, because then they may not tune in ever again. When you were the number 1 rated show on the air for multiple years running, like Cheers was, you could get away with more continuity than most other sitcoms could, or most other TV shows could, whereas Babylon 5, that was part of the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The whole point of this series is it is structured like a novel. And there's the beginning, there's the middle, there's the end, and this is a big part of it. That was part of the sales pitch, saying, no, this is the nature of the show, and that's what's going to set it apart. So the P10 listened well in terms of this is the order in which the episodes should be aired. They did their own thing in how much time there should be between the episodes, but they were quite respectful of, no, we go from here to here to here to here to here.
Right. And it's rewarding. The one of the things I'm having to remember, and you mentioned it in one of our early episodes, is that the first season of this show is almost like a precursor novel more than the first novel. I mean, I kind of think of this as like a 5-volume set instead of a 5-year-long novel, but one of those sets that like tells a continuous story the whole time. But in any case, season 1 feels more like the precursor prologue than it does the actual first chapter. Everything's being set up and put in place in ways that don't really have immediate bearing on anything. And things don't really get underway until the second season gets underway. It's just, but yeah, the idea that this whole thing was set up and created and conceived of ahead of time. When I tell people about the show and they don't know what it is, I'm like, well, imagine a TV show that knew exactly what it was doing from day one and got the chance, for the most part, to do exactly that. And, that's a really cool thing that we often get the promise of in modern day TV, but we rarely get the successful execution of.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, for the most part, Babylon 5 succeeded.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, especially in season 3. There's no surprise cast changes in season 3. Not saying there aren't cast changes, they're just, none of them are surprise.
Mm-hmm.
At least not to the creators. Right? Yeah, as far as they were concerned, this is where they were telling the story they wanted to tell, and boy does it show. Because yes, yeah. as great as this is, oh, what's coming? Which I'm sure we want to both go watch now. So right? Shall we tell people how to get a hold of us now?
I suppose so, because we are going to be going on a break soon, because like we said, after episode 9, next week's episode, they went on another broadcast break, which means at some point during that gap, we're going to do a feedback episode. You should write us letters, like actual letters with paper and quill, parchment, envelopes, carriers, messenger pigeons, or email. How can they email us?
Well, they can send an email to babylon530yearslater@gmail.com, your choice of the numerals or the words. We've captured all 4 email addresses, and we've had a fair amount coming in so far, at least at this point. As we said, we're just a few days away from recording our first feedback episode. But between Ryan Wilson and Mohandas Randy and a couple other people commenting on YouTube here, and as well as Douglas Adamson from Scotland, we have had some feedback for that one. So hopefully, by the time you hear this, that will have just continued and built till we'll be hearing from a lot more people on those email addresses.
Or even just from the same people and more to say. Either way, totally works. You can also leave us comments on our websites. I mostly just get spam comments on my website, so hopefully I'll get real comments also on this show. Go to johnreadscomics.com. There is no H in spam comments, and leave your thoughts on the episode posting for this or any other episode.
Yeah, you can also leave comments at bureau42.com, where all of my podcasts live, and mine are not the only podcast there.
And leaving reviews on your favorite podcatcher is always a nice thing to do. That way, if somebody searches Babylon 5 podcasts, like I have done in the past before we did this show, they'll see ours and say, oh, I wonder what that show's like. And they'll read your review, and you will say such beautiful, amazing things that they will feel compelled in their soul to give us a listen. And if you do that, we'll read them on the air. And thank you for them. However, we only check Apple Podcasts as a matter of course. So if you leave your review somewhere else, thank you so much. Fantastic. Amazing. Just let us know that it's out there if you would like us to read it and acknowledge you for it on the air.
You can also leave comments on our YouTube posts, as I've said, several people already are doing. And we'd be happy to read those on the air as well.
So yes, that brings us to our final moments of the show, I guess, where we're going to come back next week.
Yes, we'll come back for the Point of No Return, which is a title that also was the season theme. So when you mentioned we mentioned in the past, there is one theme, one title that covers the whole season, and that title was used for our next week's episode, Point of No Return, which will, if all goes as planned, feature a returning guest.
Yay!
Right, so thank you for listening.
And good eating to you in jail while you write your thoughts on a parchment.